President Trump announced that he's fired National Security Advisor John Bolton. Today, the president tweeted, "I informed John Bolton last night that his services are no longer needed at the White House. I disagreed strongly with many of his suggestions, as did others in the administration, and therefore, I asked John for his resignation, which was given to me this morning. I thank John very much for his service. I will be naming a new National Security Advisor next week." Bolton had served as National Security Advisor since April of last year when he replaced H.R. McMaster. White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham said the president did not like a lot of Bolton's policies and that they disagreed. Earlier this afternoon, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo defended the president's decision.
The president's entitled to the staff that he wants at any moment. This is a staff person who works directly for the president of the United States, and he should have people that he trusts and values and whose efforts and judgments benefit him in delivering American foreign policy. It's what, as cabinet member, Secretary Mnuchin and I try and do each and every day, and when the president makes a decision like this, he's well within his rights to do so.
CBS News White House correspondent Paula Reid joins me now. So, Paula, we know Bolton was opposed to President Trump's most recent plan to have Taliban leaders come to Camp David, but this sort of seems like this was a long time coming.
Rena, first I want to acknowledge for your viewers that noise is the construction of a new White House fence, nothing to be alarmed about. But exactly, the White House's official version about Ambassador Bolton is that this was not about the Camp David meeting that was proposed between the president and the Taliban. They said, look, this dispute between these two men goes back. They really disagree on a lot of fundamental issues. We know that they disagree on how to engage with many of our adversaries, North Korea, Iran, also Afghanistan. And our whole team has been working on this, Rena. Our producer, Finn Gomez, he was on the phone with his sources recently, and they were saying that recently Ambassador Bolton had gotten, quote, too big for his britches, a cardinal sin here in the Trump White House. Our Sarah Cook and Arden Farhi have been talking to their sources. They've learned that under Bolton's tenure, the White House and the National Security Council have effectively been operating as separate entities. Now, the National Security Council is a component of the executive office. They said that too often Bolton would not engage the president or defer to the president on his priorities, and instead just pursued his priorities.
And what does Bolton have to say? Have we heard from him? What's his take on all of this?
We have. Fascinatingly, Rena, he has opted to tell his story both on Twitter and in texting reporters. He disputes the idea that he was fired. In fact, he insists that he offered to resign last night, and the president said that he would get back to him. Now, he's also texting reporters saying that, quote, "I'll have my say in due course, but I've given you the facts on my resignation." And he says that his sole concern is U.S. national security and declined to answer any additional questions.
You know, Paula, ever since Bolton was brought on, his critics have said that his approach could push the U.S. into a confrontation. People were concerned about his rhetoric with Iran. Now that he's out, what do you think this means for the president's foreign policy?
Well, when he was brought in, there were a lot of folks who were surprised because of Bolton's worldview. He's a known entity here in Washington. We knew what he was about. We knew his worldview. We knew his approach, particularly to these adversarial nations. He would be much more hawkish, much more skeptical than a president who campaigned on a promise to engage our adversaries, saying, look, wouldn't it be great if we could get along with North Korea or Russia? The president has preferred to try to negotiate, try to engage these adversaries, where historically Ambassador Bolton has preferred a more aggressive, militarized approach to adversarial international relationships. So I think folks were surprised when he was brought on. The fact that they just did not agree on many foreign policy issues suggests that ultimately the president's approach will win out, and the president may once again invite adversaries or controversial groups to Camp David. The president wants to continue to engage adversaries, and he does not necessarily want to engage the U.S. in any more foreign entanglements. That is a signature campaign promise, and it appears that Ambassador Bolton just was not helping him achieve that.
Any word, Paul, on who might replace him?
So far, the White House says it's not engaging on that issue. They said by the end of the day, they may perhaps put out some names of the folks that they're considering. They may also release the resignation letter. But what's going to be so interesting, Rena, is in a few minutes here at the White House, we have a briefing, an on-camera briefing with the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and the Secretary of Treasury, the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin. This will be quite interesting. These two men are going to take some questions on some expected sanctions, but Pompeo, he was really, he was often at odds with Ambassador Bolton, so there are going to be a lot of questions about their relationship and reaction to this decision.
Absolutely. Look forward to seeing that. Paula Reid, thank you very much, joining us from the White House.